Hello watch enthusiasts and welcome to Watch Chronicler. For many, the Omega Speedmaster is the definition of the sports watch. After all, no other watch has ever demonstrated such breadth of functionality, from a racing watch to a timepiece now used by astronauts from most space programs for over half a century. Perhaps it's the best representation of a product distilled to pure functionality to a point of being practically and aesthetically timeless. In the field of space exploration, the Speedmaster has become the go-to watch, particularly for the astronauts of NASA. However, this is where today's story becomes interesting, and the very reason why the watch before you isn't any normal Speedmaster. It's my favourite Speedmaster, the Mark III, the first automatic Speedmaster, launched in 1971. You see, when one thinks of Soviet Cosmonauts, it's Strela and Polzhok watches which one thinks about, watches freely available behind the Iron Curtain. Of course, more recently, Russian cosmonauts have worn an assortment of watches from Fortises in the 1990s to the Omega Speedmasters of today. Even so, recent research proves that the pioneers of Soviet spaceflight wore some of the most wonderful and innovative Omegas ever made. These ranged from the Flightmaster to the aforementioned Speedmaster Mark III, and even the Alaska Project watches designed for but never used by NASA. In today's video, prepare for a journey through space, time and the watches of Soviet cosmonauts before the end of the USSR. I should also note that I won't be recounting these missions in order, but instead by watch, as I reckon this gives a better idea of the landscape. We all know the story of how the Speedmaster became the watch of choice for NASA during the 1960s, and how it went to the moon in 1969 aboard Apollo 11. The Apollo program, though, went rather a lot further than just to the moon, and in 1975 did something which nobody would have believed a decade earlier. It docked with the Russian Soyuz capsule. Famously, the respective commanders Stafford and Leonov shook hands through the hatch and essentially ended the space race. This was, by the way, the same Leonov who performed the first spacewalk a decade earlier. Rather aptly, both Leonov and his flight engineer Kubasov were 1970s Speedmaster professionals, later variants with the 861 movements to the 321 movements still used by the Apollo crew. It's believed that 11 Speedmasters made it into space for this mission. More interesting was Leonov's other watch. You see, the manually wound Speedmaster actually wasn't a favourite amongst Soviet astronauts. Given the range of well-proven manual Russian chronographs available at the time, this does make sense. What they didn't have, however, was all the additional tech which Omega packed into their watches in the 70s, and which was largely ignored by NASA. If you're enjoying this video, remember to like, share and subscribe, and head over to our Instagram page to always catch the latest updates about our videos, podcasts and articles. If you like what you see, take a look at our website, watchchronicler.com, to read full articles and to catch the very best of our productions. In 1969, Omega launched the Flightmaster, the watch which gave Omega its conical 70s case and the busy, feature-rich dials. Incorporated into 3 crowns and 2 pushers, this watch initially used the caliber 910, a modification of the 861 chronograph caliber with an independently set second time zone hand, a 24-hour indicator, and a rotating internal bezel. The adjustable second time zone was, by the way, groundbreaking, as even the contemporary Rolex GMT Master couldn't offer the same. After this model, Omega replaced the movement with the caliber 911, which swapped the 24 hours for running seconds. This watch was supplied by Omega for the crew of this Soviet mission, and was used extensively in training, though not during the actual flight. Considering that it was a much more capable watch than the Speedmaster, it seems understandable that Soviet cosmonauts were officially provided with these watches by Omega. The first verifiable use of the Flightmaster was during Soyuz 14 in 1974 when Pavel Popovich and Yuri Artyukhin docked with the Salyut 3 space station. On Artyukhin's wrist was a caliber 911 Flightmaster with yellow accents. Interestingly, the Flightmaster had already been discontinued for 2 years by this stage. This mission, however, was a walk in the park compared to what the Flightmaster had to endure during Soyuz 21 on the wrist of Vitaly Zolobov when the 1976 mission was abandoned due to, reports suggest, nitric acid fumes in the Salyut 5 space station. So we can now be sure that the Flightmaster was indeed used by the USSR, but it certainly wasn't the only 70s Omega. At this point, having my Speedmaster Mark III in this video begins to make sense. You see, the Speedmaster Mark III was launched after NASA's rejection of the Mark II, when it must have been fairly clear to Omega that NASA was unlikely to accept new forms of the Speedmaster for their spaceflights. Instead, they took the Speedmaster in a brand new direction: automation. As many will know, The first trio of automatic chronographs came in 1969 from Japan and Switzerland, but Omega and Lemania, its own movement manufacturer, wanted a piece of the action. For this they created the fiercely complex Lemania 1340, or 1040 as it was branded in the Omega. The Omega version was of a higher level with better finishing, 22 joules, and a 24-hour indicator disc built into the second subdial. At around 8mm thick, this movement was a monster and was constructed by taking the caliber 861 from the Speedmaster, adding automatic winding, a planetary gear system, the date, the central chronograph minutes, and the 24-hour counter. It's so complicated that it uses a similar system to a rattrapante chronograph just to operate the chronograph minute counter. Despite being ridiculously overcomplicated and, as a consequence, short-lived, this movement made the Speedmaster Mark III a sort of Flightmaster for spaceflight, and thus just right for Soviet cosmonauts. The first documented appearance of the Speedmaster Mark III and its truly space-age case was on the wrist of Gennady Sarafonov during the 1974 Soyuz 15, a real shambles of a mission. Intended to do much the same thing as Soyuz 14, Soyuz 15 failed to dock with the Salyut 3 station due to a malfunctioning of the Igla docking system, and was then aborted altogether when it became clear that the craft had neither enough electricity nor enough fuel to try docking again. Not exactly the perfect start for the Speedmaster Mark III, but a very good test of its functionality in unforeseen circumstances. The Speedmaster Mark III's tenure continued for Soyuz 24 when the problems of the aforementioned Soyuz 21 were resolved, before Salyut 5 was deorbited 6 months after this 1977 mission. More excitingly, the Speedmaster Mark III was instrumental in a mission taking the first Bulgarian, Georgy Ivanov, into space, and being commanded by the first civilian, Nikolai Rukavishnikov, a Mark III wearer. 1979's Soyuz 33 was also the mission with the first in-orbit failure of the Soyuz engines. The situation was in fact rather serious, as it was thought that all engines were left inoperable as the craft drifted quickly away from the Salyut 6 station. Ultimately the engines did fire, but for too long, resulting in a steep 10G re-entry. It's believed that the Mark III was used here in addition to during training for this mechanically brutal mission, although photos only remain of training. As a side note, the Speedmaster 125, the first automatic chronometer chronograph, and a watch using a similar movement, was worn by Vladimir Janibekov from the late 1970s until the Soyuz T6 mission in 1982. Now though, we come to a real conundrum, the missions Soyuz 25 and 26 in 1977. These missions to the Salyut 6, one a failure, the other a success, reveal a very interesting feature on the sleeves of the spacesuits. Visible in these pictures are enormous, round, red watch cases with white dials. These, believe it or not, are examples of the Omega Speedmaster Alaska I. Designed for NASA in 1969, the Alaska I was conceived in absolute secrecy and was an utterly groundbreaking device. Using the Speedmaster's 861 caliber, this watch was designed to avoid any temperature fluctuations which might impede its ability to function accurately. The silver dial reflected heat and gave high contrast and legibility. The case was the first ever to be made from titanium, and around it was fitted a red anodized aluminium heat shield. Unfortunately though, NASA never used this extreme answer to a space watch. But if this was a top secret device, how did the USSR get hold of it? Well, with the thawing of the space race in 1975, and the reasonably good relationship with Omega which provided the Speedmaster Mark III and Flightmaster models, it is conceivable that they decided to finally find out how it would work in space. Ultimately though, it never caught on, presumably because in reality, space simply didn't demand the engineering depth of the Alaska I. Nonetheless, as with all the other watches in this video, it's pretty clear that Omega truly produced the world's most innovative watches in period, and through a strange twist of fate, the Soviet space program was just what was needed to test them. But I'll conclude the video there, and if you enjoyed it, please like, share and subscribe. It really helps us to keep these videos coming. Thank you very much for watching. This is Armon from WatchChronicler.com. Out.